If you've been trying to figure out how to install a servo winch in your HPI venture, you're going to want to watch this video. On the bench once again tonight, I've got my HPI Venture Scale Builders Kit FJ Cruiser, and the plan for this evening is to install a servo winch. And as you can probably see, I do have currently a winch installed in this truck. I'm just not real happy with the way it's laid out. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to go ahead and pull the body off, and I'll show you what I've currently got going on, and then I'll lay out the plan for what I'm going to change. So with the body off, I'm going to go ahead and start at the front of the truck. And what I've got here, this is a plastic Poison Spider bumper that is actually a factory bumper off of an Axial SCX10 2012 Rubicon, which is actually that truck back there in the corner. So this is the factory bumper off of that truck. And I've just gone ahead and cut a slot with a Dremel and installed an aluminum fairlead on there for the winch cable to come through. And if you look right here, you'll see this black piece of tubing that goes to this aluminum tube that goes all the way back to the servo winch that is mounted on the back frame rail. And the main problem with this is that there's really no good straight shot from the front to the back in this truck with the way that the motor and the steering servo and everything's laid out. So I had to run it through this tube, and it's just not a great setup. The main problem I run into is that when you got a lot of torque on the winch, then the string basically wants to become straight. And since it's going through a curved tube, it tries to straighten that tube out. And it has already broken the tube once right there. And that's what the black heat shrink is over. It is just kind of holding the tube together as a temporary fix. So tonight I'm going to be changing that. I'm going to go ahead and rip all this out, and we're going to mount the servo winch on the front of the truck rather than the back. Currently this truck is laid out where it has an almost perfectly 60-40 weight distribution, and it works really well. So I kind of hate to move that weight from the back to the front, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really be detrimental. But we'll have to test it and find out. The servo winch that's currently installed in the truck is a Brothers Overlander, just like this one right here. And this is a nice little winch. It's pretty inexpensive. At the time I bought this about 6 months ago, they only cost about $50 right on Brothers website. Price may fluctuate, but I'll go ahead and post a link in the description below so that you can check it out for yourself. And I'm not necessarily recommending this as the be-all end-all of servo winches. There's a lot of good ones out there. Check them all out, but this one's very reasonably priced. It makes decent power. You're going to get up to 350 ounce-inches of torque out of it, and it is direct power. It'll run all the way up to 4S, and it does have a built-in controller. So that's one really nice thing. You don't need any extra components like you do with some winches. You just basically plug it into an open channel on your receiver, program your radio, and you're good to go. Other than the winch, the main star of this show tonight is going to be this bracket right here. Now what I've done is I actually downloaded a file off of Thingiverse, and I printed this out on my Ender 3 Neo 3D printer that's chilling in the background back there. And if you're not familiar with 3D printing or, Thingiverse, what it is it's basically a repository where people design things in CAD and they upload the STL files. You can go and you can download the files for free and then print them out for your personal use. So if you have a 3D printer, or you know somebody that does, you can talk into printing this thing out for you. It costs almost nothing. According to my slicer program, it tells me this cost me 58 cents to make, and I made it at the highest quality that my printer will go to. So this is a very economical way to do this, and there's really not any other good options. I mean, I was looking for something like this in the aftermarket, and I ran across this, and it's almost identical to what I was envisioning in my head. Although again, this is not something I could make myself because I'm not a designer. Downloading it and printing it out is no problem whatsoever. So I'm going to go ahead and start by getting all of this stuff taken apart, getting the old winch and everything ripped out, and ready to install the bracket. Alright, I've gone ahead and cut my winch hook off and got the bumper off of the truck. So now all I've got to do is get this bumper mount bracket out of the way so that I can replace it with our 3D printed part. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off. Alright, in order to pull this bumper bracket out, you just got to remove the little bracket here for the panhard, and you got one bolt on that side, and that'll slide right out. So I've gone ahead and slid that into the frame rails, and the holes don't line up perfectly, but I think they will work good enough. I think I could probably do a little bit of work with a file on it and make it line up a little bit better. It's not quite as good a fit as the factory one was, but for right now I'm just going to go ahead and try it that way and see where it gets us. Okay, so I've got the bracket installed, and I did run into some interference with my Reese 777 servo. Now my servo is spaced down. I've got like 5 millimeters of spacer here, and if you don't have your servo spaced out, it probably won't be a problem. So I'm going to need to pull this back out, take a file to it, Dremel or something, and just clearance it out a little bit. I'm not going to do that right now. It's in there and it's fine for the moment. I want to go ahead and finish the install, see if I run into anything else that I need to take care of. So I'm going to go ahead and get the servo winch unmounted from the back of the frame here and get it moved up to the front. At this point, I've gone ahead and removed the servo winch from its original location back here on the frame rail. I've gotten rid of that bracket, and I've reinstalled it up here in our 3D printed bracket. I kind of figured that the point of this video was more to demonstrate a mounting solution for a servo winch rather than showing how to bolt things together. I kind of think there's a good chance that if you're to the point of installing a servo winch on a truck like this, you probably already know how to install a servo, and I'm not going to show you anything you don't already know. So that being said, it is all back together, wired in, function tested, all that good stuff. So I'm just going to go over what I had to do to make it fit for my application. I think that this bracket was really designed for a truck that's laid out more in the factory configuration than mine is. There's really nothing on this truck at this point that is really stock anymore. I've changed so many things that, anytime you bolt on a part that's designed for a factory truck, there's a good chance you're going to run into issues and things you have to modify, and that's what I run into. So we definitely can't blame the designer for that. I think it's a really well-designed piece. So starting at the bottom here, the first issue I ran into was that this little piece of plastic here that has the bolt hole for the panhard bar is actually hitting the corner of my Reese 777 servo. Now the problem is caused by the fact that I have a 5mm spacer that drops that steering servo down deeper into the frame, and that was done for steering geometry. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but if you have the servo that's still mounted in the factory location, or God forbid the factory servo, then you absolutely will not have that problem. So that's just me. If you've done something custom like I've done, you may run into that, but more than likely not. The second issue I ran into is right here on this fair lead piece. And if you can see, it started out as a complete rectangle, but there was no way that the spool was going to clear it. The spool was hitting at the top, and it was also hitting down inside there where you can't really see. So I had to take Dremel and get pretty aggressive with that on both the top and the bottom parts of that support. And I've checked, I've got 3 different winch spools here, and they're all the same diameter. So I don't know if the bracket was designed around a particular style or brand of spool. I can't really say, but it will not fit any of mine without modification. I was able to clearance that stuff, everything's clearing, and it's good to go. And I do think also that this was definitely designed with the factory bumper in mind. On the page from Thingiverse that I will link to below, as I've said, you can see where the little fair lead kind of hangs down like this. And in my application, it's not really necessary. If I hadn't already had this cut in here, then that would probably be fine, and your winch line would just kind of come out underneath the bumper. But, in my application, it's not really necessary. I thought about cutting it off, but then again, I'm kind of thinking, well, it sort of protects the bottom of that spool. Not that that's real important, but we'll see. If it turns out to be a problem and gets hung up on a lot of stuff, I might saw it off there. But for now, I'm going to leave it and just see how it works. So the last modification that I had to make was just to take and remove some material right here at the front of my bumper to allow it to slide back up against that bracket a lot tighter. It would fit before, but it hung out a lot farther than I was really comfortable with. The way I've already got this truck configured, I've dropped my body down pretty much as far as it can go, and I've shoved the bumper back as far into the frame as I could get it. And with this bracket here, it was actually hitting the bumper. It just wouldn't allow it to slide all the way back. It would have fit, it just would have stuck out, and I didn't like that. So I just went ahead and clearanced it, and now my bumper's right back where it started. So with the body back on there, you can see what I'm talking about. That bumper pretty much sucks right up against the front of the body, about as far as it can go. I got a really decent approach angle on this truck, and I was able to get that back the way it was when I started, and I'm real happy about that. And it pretty much looks exactly the same, with the exception that you can see the spool hanging down there before. So I am giving up a little bit of clearance there, but again, like I said, if it starts to bother me, I'll either saw it off, or I might file it down at an angle and make it more of like a kind of a skid to protect the front of that spool. But we'll see. It may not even be an issue, or it may hang up on everything. So I have gone ahead and tested it, but I'll go ahead and show that. What I've got here is a FlySky GT3B. I've used this radio on all my trucks, been using it for a while, and these are stupid cheap, but very configurable, and I'm a big fan. What I've done is I've got this button right here programmed for my servo winch on all of my trucks. So I just forward, reverse. And this is definitely not the strongest servo winch out there, but again, for this truck only weighs about 5 pounds, so 350 ounce inches is plenty fine. I don't use the servo winch all that much, but again, if you do any kind of competition crawling, it's pretty much going to be required at some point. So I figure I better have it on there, and I figure I better have one that's going to be trouble-free. And I just wasn't convinced that the one I had, or at least the way I had it installed before, that it was going to be all that trouble-free. I think it was going to end up giving me problems, and it was probably going to give me problems in the middle of a run, and that's just not really what I wanted. Alright, so I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there, but as I've said before, you know, there's just really absolutely no aftermarket support for these trucks. But luckily, you know, we live in an age of technology. We've got 3D printers, we've got file sharing, and in this situation, I was absolutely able to find a part that's going to work for me, print it for absolutely nothing. You know, probably 30 cents worth of material is what it cost me to make that, and a little bit of my time. So I'm real happy about that. And again, I'm going to link the page down in the description. And hopefully anybody else that's working on one of these trucks that's been trying to figure out how to get a servo winch mounted on it can find it useful as well. And if you did, you know, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. You know the drill. And I once again thank you for stopping by and watching, and hope to see you on the trail.